beginning of the portion, Vayelech. Vayelech Moshe v'yidaber es kol advar ma'ela kol Yisrael. Moshe is goes and he says all these words to the Jewish people. We'll see the words of consolation. He's consoling them that he's passing away, and they shouldn't feel that they're being left abandoned, because whatever his value was, only because God gave him that value. And Yeshua, although he may not be the equivalent of his Rebbe, his teacher, nevertheless, he's fully qualified to take them into the promised land. As it says, he said to them, Ben Mea Vesum Shana Anochi Hayom. Today I am 120 years old. I mean, today was the day I was born. Today is the day that I die. I can no longer go out and come. We'll see Rashi in a moment. We're not speaking within the physical context, because the Torah attests to the fact that his physical condition was perfect. He had the vibrancy and the virility of a young man. But it means within the spiritual context, all the spiritual well springs that have opened him, God shut down, and he's no longer able to communicate the word of Hashem, because his time has come to pass on. That's l'uchal od lotzis v'lovu. I cannot longer go out and come to be the intermediary between you and Hashem. Hashem Omar Elai lo savar seyagnaze. And in addition, not only I am not in the capacity of leadership, I'm not even able to physically go across the Yarden, the Jordan, not in life and not in death. Even his remains cannot cross the Yarden. Moshe was buried on the Transjordan side, which we'll discuss everything in a moment. Now, why was it important for him to share this information? The point has come, as Rashi says, is it because somehow his strength had waned? Torah attested the fact his eyesight was perfect, was not dimmed, and his vibrancy was not in any way diminished. The position and the responsibility of leadership, the baton was transferred from me to Yoshua. As I mentioned, God had sealed from him all the transmissions and the well springs of wisdom. Everything was closed down, was shut down. Just to share with you a little bit, we find that Avraham Avinu kept the Torah in entirety before it was given. Now, how did Avram come upon all the laws of the Torah, the statutes, the rational laws, all the laws of the Torah, the Taryag mitzvos, the 613 mitzvos, 248, 365, Avram Avinu kept them all. Not only that, he observed even the fences, even the Erev Tavshilin. Even when if it would be a 2-day holiday, Yom Tiv, he would have an Erev Tavshilin, which is a rabbinic enactment, to prepare from Yom Tiv to Shabbos. There was nothing which he did not keep. And it's based on a verse. Now, how did he come upon all this understanding of what Torah is? The divinity of the laws and all the subcategories and the applications of them. So the Midrash tells us that when Avraham Avinu was a fugitive and he had gone into a cave for 13 years, when he had gone into the cave, Avram did not speak Hebrew. Hebrew, we know, is referred to as Lashon HaKodesh. It's the holy tongue. Why is Lashon HaKodesh called the holy tongue? Because it's God's language. God created the world with the Hebrew language. What I'm telling you, this is the Ramban. The Ramban writes, the Nachmanides writes, the reason why it's the holy tongue, because Hebrew was the original language which all humanity, all mankind spoke Hebrew. It was only after the Tower of Babel where the 70 families were dispersed, each one was given another language. But initially, all mankind, all Adam's descendants, they spoke Hebrew. It's only once they failed, when they chose to rebel against God, with an indication of that level of detachment, they no longer spoke Hebrew, they no longer spoke the holy tongue. Avraham Avinu, how did he come upon the Hebrew language? So the Midrash tells us that when he went into the cave, he was in hiding as a fugitive for 13 years. He did not speak Hebrew. When he came out of the cave after 13 years, he spoke Hebrew. When he was in the cave during this 13-year period, and he was the only one, and the reason why he was a fugitive, because he introduced monotheism to the world, which he had come upon himself through his quest for truth. During this 13-year period, the Midrash says, Nastu shtei kloyosov, his two kidneys became kishnei mayona shel chochma, became the equivalent of two well springs of wisdom. Like a wellspring gives unceasingly water continuously, identically through his kloyos, through the kidneys. The kidneys have relevance to chochma based on many verses. His kidneys gave forth wisdom. As the wellspring gives forth continuously new surges of water, his wellspring gave forth new understanding of various levels of spirituality, which was the Torah in entirety. Over here, Rashi cites the Gemara, "Nistu mimenu mesoros u'ma'ayonos ha'chochma," the wellsprings of chochma. I mean, how did Moshe come upon his levels of understanding? This is something which God transmitted to him. Since his connection was to God, with all the channels were open, it was an unceasing source of information which was continuously channeled to Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the equivalent of a wellspring which continuously gave forth new levels, breadth, and depth of understanding of what spirituality is. They were shut down. As Avraham Avinu also had the Mayonas HaChochma, Hashem, and that's how Avraham Avinu, although it was not within the context of obligation, but Avraham Avinu was aware of all the laws of the Torah, the rational laws, the statutes, and even the rabbinic fences to safeguard those laws themselves. However, he's referred to as Eina Mitzuvose. He was not obligated, and despite the fact he was not obligated, understanding the value of conditioning himself in the context of spirituality, he observed the Torah in its entirety. That was Avraham Avinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to tell the Jews that his value no longer has any value because Hashem has turned off all the channels that for what he represented until now, and therefore he's coming to console them. Today is the last day of his life. It's the day he was born, and now he's passing on. And Yeshua himself, the mantle of leadership, has been given over to Yeshua. So here there's a beautiful Sefarno. The Sefarno writes, we had read in last week's reading, the Jews entered into a new covenant, right? The covenant of Arevus, that all Jews are responsible for one another, and there was a new renewal of that covenant of Sinai. So over here he explains after he completed all the aspects of the covenant, he's come to console them that they should not grieve over his passing, that they feel that they're abandoned. Why? They should simchas habris haruya lehem lohoros eliyosem ekablim habris b'simcha. There was a vital component which had to be in place. When you receive the bris, it has to be with joy. It should not be to any degree infringed upon due to any level of grief, of grieving. So he's coming to put them in a mindset, an emotional state, that there's a time that you must maintain that level of happiness, of ecstasy. It cannot be in any way detracted. Because when you enter into a bris, it should not be intermingled to any degree with any level of what? Of grieving. The kava bris b'simcha al derech and he quotes a pasuk in Tehillim, Yismach Yisrael Bosov. When the Jews have a relationship with Hashem, it's Yismach Yisrael Bosov. The Jews rejoice with their maker. We always have to be in a position of rejoicing with a maker. Ka'omro, this is something interesting. When a person brings his peace offering, you can only bring it in the Beis Hamikdash. The samachta f'nei Hashem Elokecha, have the full value of that experience to go to the Beis Hamikdash, which is the location of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. You have to be in a state of happiness. That any way that joy is infringed upon, that automatically limits the level of to what degree you could be affected by being exposed to the Shekhinah. That's the Shlomo. Identically now, to be a full beneficiary of the bris, you have to be in a state of joy, and that joy in any way cannot in any way be infringed upon. There, as a result of that, he's coming to console them that they shouldn't feel bereft, they shouldn't feel abandoned, and they should have the same level of joy despite the fact is that he's no longer going to be there. As it says, Yismach Yisro Bosov, the Jews have to rejoice with the Maker. Okay? Now, in last week's Parsha, when we spoke about the bris, how did the Parsha begin? Atim nitzov hayom kulchem. Today you stand together. That was the beginning of last week's Parsha. Atem nitzov Hashem kulchem. So over there, the Sevarno said something interesting. Not the Sevarno, the Balaturim. Watch nitzov atem kulchem. Just as at Sinai, when Hashem gave the Torah, it says they stood at the foot of the mountain. Remember? That's the pasuk says. It says, and they stood, it says, Vayichan. When it says they camped at the foot of the mountain, how did they camp? In the singular, not in the plural. It doesn't say Vayachnu. They camped in the plural, they camped in the singular. See, he says, just as at Sinai, when they received the Torah, it was in as one unit, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now that they're entering into the bris, a new covenant with Hashem, Torah tells us, nitzavim, they're standing, kulchem, united, unified. And as we mentioned, because we said that assuming God's characteristic of unity, that creates the compatibility to be the greatest beneficiary of what? Of that experience at that moment. So just as at Sinai, it was by Yichan in the singular, last week's Parsha, Atem Nitzoma, Atem Kulchem, you stand united since you're receiving a new level of relationship with God, which strengthens and secures that relationship. You must display that characteristic of Kulchem, unity. That was the Balaturim last week. Similarly saying here, just as he says at Sinai, so this is what I'm bringing out. None of them that have you should have died at Kabbalah Torah, right? Why? But it was delayed until the 8th day when they would install as Kohanim. If you remember, why? Why did they deserve to die at Sinai? Because they themselves, although they were special, we find by Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was at the burning bush, and all of a sudden he realized that the Shekhinah was there, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He turned away his face. He did not look directly into the Shekhinah, at the divine presence. And the Gemara tells us in Brachos, because of that, because he did not look, that was an indication of his level of humility. Therefore, he was merited to be able to have a level of understanding of God that no one else had. Because he did not look, therefore Hashem revealed to him an understanding of who he was, which he wouldn't have been qualified for. Not about view that they looked straight at the Shekhinah, which was a level of disrespect. Because of that, they deserved to die at Sinai. They and the Shivim Zakanim, they all deserved to die. So why didn't they die? That since when the Torah was given, the state has to be besimcha, and if they would have died, it would have detracted and diminished the simcha. God did not want to allow any level of grieving or mourning to be intermingled with the simcha, with the joy at Kabbalah Torah. That's Chazal. That's the Medrash. So similarly, just as over there, it would have been a diminishment. It would have affected and not allowed the Torah to be given in that full state of joy. So Hashem delayed the passing of Nadav Avihu and the 60 elders until a later time. Identically here, Moshe, it's crucial and essential. He consoles them that becoming aware that it's his last day of existence, that he's passing on, they should not grieve to any degree at this moment, because the joy has to be at that special level to be full beneficiaries of whatever's taking place at the time. He says, it's same, Yarvu Simchas Habris, Haruilem Lidhoros, and Yosem Kablim Habris B'Simcha. We find very interesting. We find by the Akedah, which we just read on Rosh Hashanah, Avram Avinu comes back from the Akedah, and what's the first thing he finds out? That Sari Menu passes away. She had passed away. And the Torah tells us he came to eulogize her and to cry. And the word lifkosa, if you remember, lifkosa, the chaf is small. It's written smaller than the other letters. Now the question, why is it written smaller? So I mentioned then a Ksaf Sofer. The Ksaf Sofer says, a human being, we're emotional. And it's not like a machine, you turn a person on and off. Avram Avinu understood what was the value of the Akedah and that he succeeded in that test, which was the most difficult test. Because of that experience, that test, he understood, guaranteed the survival of the Jewish people for eternity. That whenever Satan will prosecute us for our shortcomings on our record, even to destroy us, the schus, the merit of the Akedah will silence that prosecution. So Avram Avinu, from where is he coming when he's returning from Har Moriah, from the Akedah? He's at a level of ecstasy that despite all the impediments, the Satan came as a raging river, he tried to stop him, not even to allow him to take the ram to bring him in place of Yitzchok. As it says, the ram was caught in the thicket. And yet Avram Avinu succeeded at every level. And Hashem says, now you're guaranteed for eternity, the Jewish people will always be. So what level of simcha, of ecstasy was Avram at that moment? It's the maximum that a human being could be able to internalize something which has infinite value. That was Avram Avinu. He comes back and he realizes that his wife, who was his partner in everything he did, passed away at the age of 127 years old. What should he be done? He should have been devastated and destroyed and grieved to the core of his being. But humanly, because emotionally and mentally and understanding what he just achieved, it is impossible to fully grieve as a person normally would, because he's going from one level and the other. It's not possible for one to fully undermine the other. He cried, but the crying was within a context of limitation because of what he just experienced and what he just achieved. Because Avram Avinu, why did he have such a level of simcha? And that simcha did not allow him to grieve sufficiently for Zori Menu, only because he appreciated, understood what the value of that Akedah was. That's Avram Avinu. Because Avram Avinu, what was his whole value? His value is only to live for the glory of God. This guarantees the glory of God forever, because the world was only created for the Torah and the Jewish people. And if God forbid, if the Klal Yisrael would ever be put in a position where they could be actually destroyed, then God's glory is in jeopardy. Avram Avinu was at that level. And because of that, even the passing of Sari Menu, who was a matriarch, was not able to allow him to fully cry and grieve on our behalf. Therefore, the Torah writes that the kaf small to indicate that it was not a full crying, a full grieving, because he was coming from the heights of ecstasy and joy. It could not come down to that level. Similarly here, for Klaus and not Avram Avinu, since they're entering to a bris, which is the equivalent of Kabbalah Satorah, it has to be an ultimate level of joy. Therefore, to whatever degree Moshe Rabbeinu was able to console the Jewish people, that they shouldn't now feel bereft and to grieve, which will be an infringement on this, Therefore, that's the reason why he spoke to them as he spoke to them.